The first thing I noticed wasn't the survey stakes. It was the sign. Plastic, professional, bright orange with black lettering. Cascade Bay Development, future site of Lakeview Estates. Zip tied to the front gate of my aunt's cottage like it had always belonged there. My aunt had been dead for 6 weeks. I sat in my car for a moment with the engine still running, looking at that sign through the windshield. The lake was behind the property, flat and silver in the morning light. My aunt had taught me to fish on that lake. She had kept a bait shop in the outbuilding to the right for 37 years. The same hand-painted sign above the door, the same bell above the entrance that rang whenever a customer came in. I had spent every summer of my childhood in that building, counting minnows into cups and watching my aunt write receipts, by hand in a ledger she'd inherited from her own father. I turned off the engine. My brother was standing by the gate with his arms crossed, and my sister-in-law was beside him wearing the kind of patient expression that means she's already rehearsed her lines. A man in a polo shirt with a company logo on the breast pocket stood slightly behind them, holding a tablet. I got out of my car. My brother didn't wait for me to reach him. "She left it to me," he said, loud enough that it carried across the gravel. "The cottage, the shop, everything. Amended trust, executed in April. I figured you'd show up eventually, so I wanted to be here." April. My aunt had died in May. My throat tightened, but my voice came out flat. "I'd like to see the amendment." "You'll see it through your own attorney," he said. "That's how this works." My sister-in-law stepped forward slightly, chin lifted. "She loved you," she said, and the way she said it made the word sound like a consolation prize. "But she knew you'd never commit to this place the way we would. She wanted someone who'd..." "Contract," I repeated, 6 weeks after she died. He pulled a folder from under his arm and held it out toward me. "There's a release form, acknowledging the transfer. It would make this cleaner for everyone." I took the folder, because paper has a way of telling the truth if you know how to read it. The release form was a single page. It had my name on it, a property description, and a signature line. What it didn't have was a case number, a trust instrument number, or any reference to the court. It was the kind of document that looks official until you've seen a real one. I handed it back. "No," I said. My brother's jaw tightened. "You're not on the amendment. You have no standing here." My sister-in-law's voice dropped lower. "Your aunt chose this," she said. "You being difficult doesn't change that." I didn't answer either of them. I turned around, got back in my car, and drove toward town. The Carver County Recorder's office smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper, the same way every county building smells in a small town. I pushed through the glass door and took a number from the dispenser by the entrance. When the clerk called me forward, I asked for the trust instrument and the recorded amendment for my aunt's property on Lakeshore Road. She typed, waited, printed. 2 pages slid out of the machine. The original trust was there, my aunt's name, the property description dated 12 years ago. The amendment was there too, dated April 14th, executed at Ellsworth Notary Services on Route 9, with a notary stamp and a signature I recognized as my aunt's, or almost recognized. Something about it was wrong in the way a copy of a painting is wrong. The proportions are right, but the weight is off. I looked at the notary stamp, license number NX7742. "Can you tell me if this notary license is still active?" I asked. The clerk looked at the stamp, then at her computer. Her typing slowed. "That license was retired," she said carefully, 2 years ago. I felt cold in a very specific practical way, but this document is dated 4 months ago. She looked at the screen again, then at me. "I can only certify what was presented for recording. I can't verify the notarization itself. That would be the notary's office or the Secretary of State." "Can you tell me if anyone has accessed this trust file recently?" I asked. "Requested copies?" She checked another screen. "We have a public access log." She scrolled, then paused. "Yes, a copy was requested 2 months ago." "Name?" I asked. She turned the screen slightly toward me. The name in the log was my brother's. I asked for certified copies of both the original trust and the amendment, along with the access log printout. She stamped them while I stood at the counter, keeping my face calm and my hands still. Ellsworth Notary Services was a one-room office in a strip mall between a tax preparer and a dry cleaner. There was a handwritten sign in the window that said "Walk-ins welcome," and a bell above the door that reminded me of my aunt's bait shop, which was not a coincidence I needed to think about right now. The woman behind the counter was somewhere in her 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses, and the posture of someone who has spent decades sitting very straight because bad posture loses clients. Her nameplate read, Ms. Dunning. I need to ask about a notarization, I said. I set the certified copy of the amendment on the counter and pointed to the stamp. License number NX7742. I was told this license was retired 2 years ago. Ms. Dunning's eyes went to the stamp, then to my face, then back to the stamp. She didn't say anything for a moment. This notarization is dated April 14th of this year, I said. I see that, she said quietly. She opened her computer. Her fingers moved carefully across the keyboard, deliberate in a way that told me she understood what she was about to find. NX7742, she said almost to herself. That was Mr. Grover. He retired in January of last year. She looked up. This office doesn't use that stamp. Could someone have duplicated it? I asked. Ms. Dunning's jaw tightened very slightly. Our stamps are secured, but a stamp can be copied if someone has access to a clear impression. She clicked something, then leaned closer to her screen. I keep a log of every notarization performed in this office. Every document, every signer, every date. She scrolled, then stopped. April 14th. I waited. We were closed on April 14th, she said, her voice flat. Federal holiday. I can show you our office closure record. Something in my chest went very still. So this document was never notarized here. I cannot tell you what it is, Ms. Dunning said carefully. I can tell you it was not notarized in this office on that date. I asked her to print the closure record. She printed it without hesitation and stamped it with her own license number, which was not NX7742. Then she did something I didn't expect. She opened a lower drawer and removed a sealed envelope. My aunt's handwriting was on the outside. My name was on it, written with the slight loop on the capital L that I had spent years as a child trying to replicate. Ms. Dunning set it on the counter between us. Your aunt came to me in March, she said. 6 weeks before she died. She had me notarize a letter and asked me to keep it in secure storage. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were careful. She said that if anyone ever came in to question her trust documents, or if anyone challenged any amendment she was not present to affirm, I was to give this letter to the challenger. She executed a real amendment in March, I asked. Yes, properly. Witnessed, notarized, every requirement met. She tapped the envelope. This letter explains her intentions. My hands were steady when I picked it up. My eyes weren't. I asked Ms. Dunning to stay while I read it. She nodded and stood back. My aunt's handwriting was the same as it had always been, careful and unhurried. She didn't start with explanation. She started with my name and went straight to the point, which was exactly how she talked. She wrote that the bait shop and the cottage were mine. She had always intended them to be mine. She described the property by legal description, parcel number included, the same way someone writes when they know their words are going to matter later. She wrote that she knew my brother would be unhappy with this decision, and that she had made peace with that. She wrote that she was leaving this letter with Ms. Dunning because she wanted a record that couldn't be accessed by anyone who might have reason to interfere with it. Then she wrote a line that made me stop. She wrote, if any document is produced that claims to change my intent after March of this year, it is not mine. I signed nothing after March. She had seen it coming. Not vaguely, not emotionally, specifically. She had predicted the shape of what my brother was capable of, and prepared a counter to it before he could move. Ms. Dunning was watching me. I can certify the letter as a true copy, she said quietly, and provide a sworn statement about the circumstances under which it was deposited. Do that, I said, please. I called my attorney from the parking lot. Rona Chaston had handled my aunt's original trust 12 years ago, which meant she knew the document better than anyone, and she did not waste time when I gave her the short version. Your brother recorded a forged amendment, she said. It wasn't a question. The notary stamp belongs to a retired license. The office was closed on the date of execution. The original notary has a sworn letter from my aunt deposited in March, stating nothing she signed after March should be considered valid. Rona went quiet for 3 seconds. Where are you right now? Strip mall parking lot on Route 9. Get back to the recorder's office, she said. I'm drafting a notice of pending claim and a lis pendens. I need you to record them against the parcel today, before Cascade Bay does anything further with the title. He said they're already closing. Then we move faster than he does, Rona said. I'll email you the documents. Get them recorded today. Once it's in the public record, Cascade Bay can't claim clean title. I was already putting the car in reverse. The recorder's clerk recognized me when I came back through the door. She pulled a fresh number from the dispenser and handed it to me before I could reach for one myself. When I got to the counter, I slid Rona's printed notices under the partition. The clerk looked them over, checked the case reference number, and nodded. About 15 minutes to process, she said. I'll wait. While she worked, my phone buzzed. A text from my brother. You're making this harder than it needs to be. The developers already paid the deposit. You're embarrassing yourself. I didn't respond. Embarrassment was not the problem I was trying to solve. A second message from an unknown number. This is your brother's attorney. Any further interference with this property transfer will be treated as tortious interference. We advise you to cease immediately. I forwarded it to Rona without comment. She replied in under a minute. Good. Now they're on record communicating. Don't reply. The clerk came back with 2 stamped instruments, instrument numbers printed at the top in the clean, indifferent font of a government office. Recorded, she said. The parcel is now flagged. I read Rona the instrument numbers over the phone. She said she was already on the phone with Cascade Bay's title company. I drove back to my aunt's cottage because Rona told me to document the current condition of the property. She said to take photographs of anything that indicated access or for alteration. She said not to go inside. She said if my brother was there, say nothing and photograph everything. My brother was there. My sister-in-law was sitting on the tailgate of his truck with her phone in her lap, and she looked up when I parked, and her expression went from relaxed to hard in about half a second. My brother came out of the cottage's side door before I'd fully gotten out of my car. You need to leave, he said. This is private property. I took out my phone and started photographing the development sign on the gate. Then the boarded window. Then the survey stakes along the property line. What are you doing? He said louder. Documenting, I said. My sister-in-law slid off the tailgate. She's harassing us, she said, already looking at her phone. I'm calling the sheriff. Go ahead, I said, and kept photographing. The deputy who arrived was a tall man named Deputy Alston with a body camera. He didn't bother angling away from anyone. He had the expression of someone who has walked into the middle of 2 family property disputes to be surprised by any of them. My brother met him at the gate first. She's been harassing us. This is a closed property sale. She has no right to be here. Deputy Alston looked at me. Ma'am, are you Lee? Yes, I said. Are you claiming an interest in this property? Yes. And I have recorded notices in the county record to that effect, filed within the last hour. I held up the recorder's receipts. Instrument numbers are on these if you want to run them. Deputy Alston took the papers. He didn't pretend to be a title attorney. He did the thing that good deputies do in civil disputes. He looked for whether anyone had a formal recorded position and called it in. He stepped aside and spoke into his radio. The reply came back in under a minute, and I watched his posture change, just slightly. He walked back toward my brother. Parcel shows 2 recorded notices from this afternoon. He pending claim and Liz pendens. There's an active legal dispute on this title. My brother's face went rigid. We're closing next week. That'll be between your attorneys, Deputy Alston said. Right now, this is a disputed property, which means I'm not removing anyone for trespass when there's a recorded claim. My sister-in-law stepped toward me, lowering her voice so it felt personal. You were never here, she said. We were the ones visiting, calling, driving out on weeknights. You showed up at holidays and acted like that counted. I didn't answer. I had photographs of a boarded window and recorded instrument numbers, and those were going to matter a great deal more than her definition of what counted. My brother looked at Deputy Alston one more time. Can you make her leave? Deputy Alston's voice was patient but final. Sir, there is a recorded legal dispute on this property. I can't remove a party with a recorded claim for trespass while the title is actively flagged. He wrote in his notepad. He photographed the development sign and the stakes and my brother's paperwork and my recorder receipts. He did not ask me to leave. My brother's face went the color of someone who has just realized that confidence is not the same thing as winning. Rona filed an emergency motion that night for injunctive relief, asking the court to halt any transfer or physical development pending resolution. She attached the notary closure record, my aunt's certified letter, Ms. Dunning's sworn statement, and the recorder's access log showing my brother had pulled copies of the original trust 2 months before producing his amendment. The emergency hearing was the following morning. My brother's attorney appeared by phone and spent 11 minutes arguing that the amendment was properly executed and that I was attempting to obstruct a legitimate transfer. Then the judge asked a single question. Counsel, are you aware that the notary license on the amendment was retired 19 months before the document was executed? There was a pause on the phone line. Counsel, the judge said. Your Honor, we're looking into that. The judge did not look like she needed him to finish looking into it. She set the certified notary records on the bench and looked at them for a moment with the expression of someone who has read a great many documents and knows exactly what she's holding. She granted the injunction. She also said something at the end that I felt in my spine. She said the materials before her raised serious questions about the authenticity of the amendment and that she was directing the county fraud unit to review the stamp discrepancy, the access log, and the timeline of the amendment's execution relative to my aunt's death. My brother was in the courtroom. I watched his face when she said it. The fraud investigators moved quickly because document forgery is not a technicality when you have a retired license number, a closure log, and a cloned stamp found in the second drawer of a home office desk, which is exactly where they found it. The stamp had been duplicated from an impression my brother had made from an old document my aunt had signed years ago and kept in her files. That detail, the stamp in the drawer, was the kind of thing that makes the rest of the story stop needing explanation. My brother and my sister-in-law were charged, filing a false instrument, fraud upon the court, forgery of a notarial act. Cascade Bay Development withdrew from the contract within a week of the injunction and sent a letter to my brother's attorney that was, based on what Rona showed me, not warm. They preserved their documentation and made clear they would be pursuing civil remedies against the parties who had misrepresented the property's title. The trust was admitted in its original and March amended form. I was appointed trustee. The parcel's record was updated to reflect the restored trust authority, and my name went on the line where my aunt had always intended it to be. The day the paperwork came through, I drove out to the cottage alone, early in the morning. I unlocked the door with the key my aunt had given me 14 years ago when she said, with no ceremony at all, that I should have a copy in case she ever needed me. The bait shop still had the hand-painted sign above the door, still had the bell. I pushed the door open and the bell rang, and the sound was so familiar that I stood completely still in the doorway and let it be what it was. My aunt had known what my brother was capable of. She had gone to a notary in March while she could still drive herself, had written a letter in her own hand and sealed it, had made sure someone outside the family was holding it. She hadn't left it to chance or goodwill or the assumption that people would do right by her wishes when money was involved. She had left it to paper. I straightened the hand-painted sign above the door, which had always hung slightly crooked to the left, and went inside. The ledger was still on the counter where she'd always kept it. I opened it to the last page she'd written on. Then I sat down behind the counter in the same chair she had sat in for 37 years and let myself stay there for a while. If your family has ever tried to move assets before you knew to look, tell me in the comments. Would you have gone straight to the records, or would you have confronted them first? I want to know. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe and I'll see you in the next.